All right, y'all, this is data science news. Because of Excel, a third of all genetics papers published in top journals have errors as many genes have names, like Sept2, the official name of Septin2, which Excel automatically makes dates. This issue was found in 2016, but still hasn't improved. We covered this a few times in a few different ways. But it is pretty crazy to think that since the finding back in literally 2016, the number of articles that are still plagued by this are hundreds of articles. Hundreds of articles. That's crazy. Like, imagine if you found an error in your data set. Like, hey, you need to drop all the data from 2010 because the machine we were working, the data collection engine we had has some pretty serious flaws. And so any of the data that you would be using in your models or using to make any findings, results, conclusions, anything would be impacted by some bad data. So don't use data from 2010, right? That seems like a pretty clear, like, hey, let's not, right? And you would find a way to not do that. You'd find either like, okay, no data from 2010, or maybe you would create some sort of fix for the error that's happening, or maybe you would have some sort of flag where now you're creating two different results, like one result with the data, one result without the data. However you would do it, right? Lots of different ways to tackle a problem like this. Biology, academic biology has said, hey, there's this really big error in the way that you're collecting data. You should fix this because it's fucking up all the results for anything dealing with these different proteins, with these different genes. And they have said, fuck your advice. The glass, yeah, that's exactly it. The glass is half full, the glass is half empty, the glass is January 2nd. That's what this is, right? And the fact that these papers are plagued by it, I stand on this soapbox, I feel like every day. And it's that academic science, in the way that it currently is set up, is optimizing not for good science. It's optimizing for good grant writing. And the things that lead to good grant writing is a quantity of papers that you could say is substantial evidence that you could obtain grant money and then finish a grant, right? Because the last thing the government or some sort of granting agency, some sort of funding agency wants to do is give money and have nothing in return, right? It doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit that's trying to help solve Alzheimer's, or if it's a for-profit industry trying to find out better ways to make their planes fly more fuel efficiently. All research is stemming from the same point, and that's if you want to do research, if you want to contribute to science in the way that it's currently set up, you need money to do that. And the only way to get money is usually through granting agencies, because no one's just going to trust you that you're a good scientist or researcher. They need evidence, and they need to split hairs. And one term that I heard from a study panel when they're reviewing, NIH R01 grants, gigantic grants, right? That will give you like upwards $1 million over the course of 6 years. The reviewers of these grants, they literally have said things like, we have to decide between the exceptional and the excellent. And how do you do that? When you have two grants that are relatively equal in impact to the scientific community, to the research community, and yet you only can choose one. And so what does that do? Well, that's excluding so much good science that we could be doing. But really, we're missing one piece, and that's how are you getting to that pay line cut above threshold? How are people making a 4% cut consistently? And the only real answer is nepotism and gaming the system. Who has the most amount of work, that says, hey, if we give this person X amount of dollars, we're going to expect Y amount of articles, Y amount of research products. So again, why am I saying all these things? It's because this all revolves around the idea of money. This all revolves around the idea of the capitalism of science. And you have the contrarian, you have the devil's advocate of, well, how would you do science if you didn't have money? In my opinion, you should try to democratize money even further. Say you get $1 million. You could expect around half of that money to actually be money you can use. The other half is taken by the university, is taken by all the facilities and faculty that the university runs to help like run the entire university. And it also goes to like other things, right? And what could those other things be? Well, they'd be things like student body activity. There'd be things like fees for NCAA sports. There'd be things like fees for extracurricular things that have nothing to do with research or science, right? And I'm not saying those are bad. I'm not saying you should take those away. I'm saying you should find ways to fund the science with science funding and fund all this other stuff with other funding. If you want to try to split that and really feed it to the scientists, then you wouldn't have a problem of 4% pay cuts at the national level. You wouldn't have a problem of seeking out support from nonprofit or funding agencies that are not necessarily associated with the government. Like, for instance, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? That's a really big one. We should be funding 100% of the research, and yet we're funding 4%. And that's not even helping solve the amount of people who want to do even more research, the amount of people who want to do even better research. What does that end up looking like in the real world? It looks like this, where it doesn't matter if good science says the work that you're doing might be absolute ass. You will literally ignore something like this, where this tweet says, in 2016, this was a really big article when this came out, in 2016, this group of people found that the majority of data that is stored, genetics data, genetics research, is stored in Excel, and those who are using Excel are converting their fucking genes into dates. And this is really fucking up calculations and fucking up aggregation and fucking up all this stuff for genetic research. Literally the field of genetics. This is fucking it up. And we still have number of articles per month published. And here's 2021 to 2022. And we're getting hundreds of papers published still. Because why? It gets them money. It supports the work that they've always done. It doesn't contradict the work that they've been doing. And it allows them to function in a way that the community just wholeheartedly agrees with, because no one wants to change their fucking program. No one wants to say there's a better way to do this because it threatens the money. That's sick. That is disingenuous.
What's a pirate's favorite programming language? Ar, 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 ar.
Ar, 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 ar.